We see a couple sharing a passionate moment in bed. Moments later, the woman, named Hannah, abruptly halts him and insists they shouldn't proceed any further. The man, named Jay, appears visibly disappointed, but he respects her choice and steps back. It becomes clear that the couple has been together for a while, yet Hannah is firm about not becoming intimate until marriage. Although Jay finds the situation frustrating, he agrees to wait since they intend to wed right after graduation. He even says that this whole abstinence thing could be a good thing. Before leaving, Jay tells Hannah he'll meet her at the library after her morning class. After Jay departs, Hannah lies in bed, reflecting on their relationship. Suddenly, an object falls from the sky, breaking through her ceiling and tearing into the wooden floor beneath. Startled, Hannah rises to investigate and discovers a peculiar object resembling a bullet that releases smoke. Before she can comprehend what it is, the object radiates a bright green entity that swiftly enters her body. Moments later, she is overwhelmed by an inexplicable force and experiences an intense desire for lust. The next day, Jay is at the college library when his friend Carl approaches him. They begin discussing their lives, and when Jay mentions Hannah, Carl is taken aback that they are still together after a year. He suggests they must have become intimate by now. However, noticing Jay's disappointment, Carl grasps the situation. He then discloses that he once dated her too, but she never allowed him to get close or even kiss her. At that moment, Hannah suddenly appears, and Jay inquires about her class. However, she unexpectedly begins to kiss him passionately, prompting Carl to leave. Hannah then insists that Jay make love to her immediately, catching him completely off guard. He suspects she might be acting under pressure and declines, but she keeps on going, saying she needs him. When Jay says that he loves her and wants to wait until they get married, Hannah's demeanor suddenly shifts, and she seems frightened for some unknown reason. She tells Jay to keep as far away from her as possible before leaving him bewildered by the encounter. Shortly after, Hannah approaches Carl in the library with lustful eyes. He is surprised, since she was just kissing Jay moments before. He asks if they fought, but she immediately starts to seduce him. She claims to know that he has desired her for a long time. Carl tries to explain that he is dating her friend Lisa, but Hannah disregards his words and speaks the same 3 words she says to Jay, "I need you." She then starts kissing him passionately, and Carl ultimately succumbs to his desires. Meanwhile, Jay is in a lab, puzzled and concerned about Hannah. A professor named Hugaro notices his gloomy expression and asks what's wrong. Jay recounts the incident at the library and worries that Hannah may have ended their relationship. He describes how she was affectionate one moment and then abruptly changed her demeanor the next. Jay mentions that Hannah isn't the type to become intimate so easily. However, the professor suggests that she might have had a change of heart. He advises Jay not to underestimate the influence of hormones, claiming that sexual hormones are one of the most underestimated sources of energy in the universe. After a while, Jay is outside the college when he spots Hannah driving away with a star quarterback named David. He panics upon seeing this and decides to follow them. Later, we see Hannah and David at her house, where he mentions needing energy for a big game that night. However, Hannah isn't concerned about his worries and begins seducing him. The two then kiss passionately, and Hannah shockingly starts to absorb David into her body until he has entirely disappeared. Soon after, Jay arrives at the house and discovers Hannah sleeping alone and nude in the bed. He demands to know where David is, but she refuses to answer and slams the door in his face. She then experiences pain in her abdomen and pleads with the entity inside her to leave her alone. Meanwhile, Jay remains outside her house, keeping watch. He sees Hannah anxiously pacing around and realizes that something is seriously amiss. Later that night, she feels a strong urge to find another man and drives away. Observing this, Jay breaks into her home to uncover what's happening. He finds the bizarre object in her room, noticing it has punctured the ceiling. Just then, Hannah's phone rings and a voicemail from Lisa plays. It turns out Carl has been missing since the morning, and Lisa is worried since they were supposed to meet her parents tonight. Lisa asks Hannah if she knows where he might be and requests a callback. Shortly after, Jay discovers David's clothing in the closet, but he doesn't witness him leaving, which confuses him. Elsewhere, Hannah is seen in a red light district, searching for a man to fulfill her desires. She is soon approached by one and quickly gets into his car. Without delay, she starts making out with him and ultimately absorbs him. The next day, Jay meets with Professor Hugaro and shows him the strange object he found in Hannah's room, explaining that it fell from the sky. They notice a lime-like substance inside it, and the professor decides to analyze it in the lab. lab. As Jay is leaving the college, he is approached by Lisa, who is extremely concerned about Carl's disappearance. She asks where Hannah is, and Jay replies that he hasn't seen her since the previous night. Hearing this, Lisa grows increasingly anxious and suspects that Hannah and Carl must have reconciled. This only angers Jay, who insists that Hannah would never return to someone like Carl. Later, Hannah is in the college restroom, touching her abdomen when Lisa arrives. The two begin chatting, and Lisa expresses her frustration about her boyfriend's sudden disappearance. At this moment, Hannah experiences a lustful impulse towards Lisa and begins to embrace her. Lisa thinks she is providing comfort and reciprocates the hug, but Hannah suddenly kisses her. This shocks Lisa, who angrily tells Hannah she's sick before storming out of the restroom. Following this, Hannah endures a mental breakdown as she feels compelled to commit vile acts. In a fit of rage, she shatters the bathroom mirror and attempts to stab herself with a shard. However, at the last moment, she refrains from such drastic measures and stops herself. Meanwhile, Jay is approached by Detective Barnett, who is investigating David's disappearance. He reveals that David was supposed to participate in a big game yesterday, but he never showed up. He also mentions that David was last seen with Hannah, and his clothes were found at her home. Jay is puzzled as to why the detective is questioning him instead of Hannah. However, the detective finds it hard to believe that Hannah could have harmed someone much larger than herself. He suggests that Jay might have been enraged by their affair and killed David out of jealousy. Barnett also discloses that fresh fingerprints were discovered on David's leather varsity jacket in Hannah's room, implying that it's Jay's. Jay denies these allegations, but the detective insists he must come to the station for further questioning. On another front, Professor Hugaro is analyzing the slime from the strange object. To his astonishment, it doesn't match any known human DNA or the biological composition of other life forms found on Earth. He then searches for information from old newspapers and discovers news about a similar object that fell from the sky in the past. Later, Jay is at the police station, trying to explain to Barnett that he found an unusual object in Hannah's room. He proposes that this object could be the reason for her bizarre behavior, but the detective dismisses him. He asserts that Hannah is merely a promiscuous woman who enjoys being with multiple men. Upon hearing this, Jay becomes furious and insists that she isn't that type of woman. However, Barnett reveals that she was seen kissing Carl, who has also vanished since then. In the following scene, we see Hannah wandering the streets, searching for her next target. Meanwhile, a police officer observes her from a distance, ready to intervene. She soon encounters a man and lures him into a dark alley where they start kissing. Moments later, the officer arrives and hears the man scream for help. He is horrified to witness the man's body being partially absorbed into Hannah. The victim pleads for assistance, so the officer shoots Hannah, and a green light radiates from the wound in her stomach. She claims that something within her is forcing her to do this and quickly loses consciousness. The remaining portion of the victim's body is then separated from her, but he tragically dies. Meanwhile, Professor Hugaro arrives at the police station to present his findings to Jay. He explains that similar strange objects fell from the sky in 1929 and 1951. Hugaro claims that, in those instances, women in the vicinity went insane and attempted to seduce numerous men who were later found to be missing. Hugaro reveals that the slime resembles female sex hormones, implying that Hannah is being controlled by an entity within her. He theorizes that since the slime isn't found in any organisms on Earth, it must originate from an alien species that feeds on sexual energy. However, Barnett finds this explanation absurd and refuses to accept it. Just then, the officer who shot Hannah arrives, visibly shaken. He corroborates the professor's account and describes what he witnessed earlier. Upon learning that his girlfriend has been shot, Jay panics and rushes to see her in the hospital. Elsewhere, a team of doctors is attempting to operate on Hannah's wound. However, they are astonished to see the injuries in her abdomen healing on their own. Hannah then opens her eyes, terrifying the medical staff. Everyone quickly evacuates the room, except one doctor who becomes trapped inside with her. Meanwhile, Jay, Barnett, and Hugaro arrive outside the room, shocked by Hannah's condition. Jay attempts to enter, but the detective stops him, warning that it is too dangerous. Next, Hannah tries to entice the doctor, but he firmly rejects her advances. This frustrates her, and she throws him across the room, rendering him unconscious. She then starts smashing things inside. Observing this, Professor Hugaro deduces that Hannah can only harm her victims if they become intimate with her. Because the doctor is resisting her, she cannot absorb him. Hannah then begins to scream like a crazed person. Soon afterward, she also collapses from exhaustion. Meanwhile, a worried Jay pleads to be let inside, insisting that he wants to help the doctor. The detective detective is still reluctant, but Jay asserts that Hannah won't harm him. After some hesitation, Barnett eventually agrees, allowing Jay to enter the room and carry the unconscious doctor outside. He then locks himself in with Hannah, despite Barnett's warnings against it. Once the distressed woman wakes up, Jay starts to kiss her. Hannah says it's still inside her and can't stop it. She tells him that she doesn't want to hurt anybody else, so they should stop getting intimate. On the contrary, Jay says they should give the entity what it wants, and is confident that Hannah won't let it kill him. They climb onto the operating bed and begin undressing. Observing this, Barnett says Jay's sacrificing himself, but Huguro thinks that since they're in love, maybe that's what's going to save them. However, the professor adds that he does not know for certain because in previous cases, the victims were not lovers or partners, but merely strangers. He explains that making love releases energy that cannot be scientifically measured. At this point, the couple begins to be intimate, and a radiant light of the entity emerges from Hannah's body, escaping the room. As it turns out, the power of their love compelled the alien to free her. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.